We're back. You're listening to Street Rod and Custom Radio. I'm your host, Brad Fanshaw. My co-host, Pete Shapur, is from SoCal Speed Shop, is not here because we're on location in Lincoln, Nebraska at Speedway Motors, and I'm talking with Speedy Bill Smith himself right here today on the show. And don't forget, today's show is brought to you by Craftsman, America's most trusted tool brand. It's trust in your hands. When we went away, we were just kind of hitting on Bill. We were talking about, we're bringing up through the years, and you brought something up about how racing back in the 40s and the 50s, there was the danger element to it, of course, which there's always a danger element, but it was pretty basic back then. Not a lot of safety equipment. And I know that one of the things that you've always been an advocate for is safety. And was that brought on because of your experiences in the early years and seeing some of the injury and death?
Well, people had a different mindset then, and lots of my drivers, I had, as I mentioned before, I think 97 over that short 40-year career of racing, hands-on. And as I would go to Knoxville, Iowa every Saturday night to run super modified sprint cars, things like that, I'd probably be taking my best buddy who was going to drive the car that night, and I was going to keep it running and change the tires and do everything that you had to do, plus drive the tow rig and keep the trailer.
You were the pit crew.
I was it. And it seemed like it was like taking somebody to the guillotine, in that mom was the word.
Yeah.
There was no conversation, possibly relating to like when you went to grandma's funeral. You realized that death was around.
What was it, almost kind of like, let's not talk about it because that could jinx us?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, yeah.
And I had one driver that, if I would ever had a brother, Lloyd Beckman was his name, fantastic eye control, quick. He could touch the tip of his toe and the tip of his nose in his prime, and you couldn't see his hand move. People say that that's impossible. Well, you've seen fighters do the same thing. Mm-hmm. We don't all have those elements as we come out of the egg.
He had his natural talents.
Natural talents, and he honed those. And at one time, if he would have had more desire and less fear and things like that, he could have gone to the top of Indianapolis or any higher level than we were running at the time. So, and you recognize these things when you have a hands-on situation. Mm-hmm. They may have focus, you can see it in their eyes. And it's...
So that had to be tough, I mean, because like you said, these were personal friends of yours. You built cars, and so you had the responsibility that you were the one building the cars. Now you're taking them to the track, so it was a lot on your shoulders thinking, you know, if something goes wrong with the car, it's on me. If something goes wrong out on the track, I'm the one who brought them here. So, but you kept motivated, you kept pushing, you kept going. Was the thrill of the competition and the challenge of the sport? Is that what it was? Lots
of challenges, lots of thrills, and you can't put your finger on your passions.
Yeah.
You can blend in with people who have the same passion at that point in time, but I don't think you can actually, and everybody's built different, you know. We all come out of the egg the same, but there's a lot of difference in personalities and desires, background, education. I happen to be a school teacher by education, and so I learned that, you know, there was people who had 70 IQs and some had 160.
Well, you and I visited earlier before the interview, and we were both very good friends with Little John Butera.
Sure.
And there's a really good example of the people that only saw what he achieved as a machinist and a mechanical engineer, and really a genius in our view because of the things that he innovated. But when you knew him as a friend and as on that interpersonal level, we both know that he had so much brain power, but maybe he didn't put a lot of that to being a personable guy, but that's kind of what makes us laugh right there about him,
Yeah.
And it's those type of things. And racing is full of personalities. It's always been full of personalities. Guys with gusto, guys with that drive, or that, as you said, that passion that you can't put a finger on it. And I think that is what has taken you to building this company and this museum and everything like that. And that's what I want to talk about when we come back. This is Brad Fanshaw. You're listening to Street Rod and Custom Radio, and I'm here today at Speedway Motors with Speedy Bill Smith. And we've got more, so don't you dare go away. And we're back. You're listening to Street Rod and Custom Radio. I'm Brad Fanshaw, your host. And as I said, my partner on the mic from SoCal Speed Shop, that's Pete Shaporis. He's back in California today because I'm here at Speedway Motors in Lincoln, Nebraska, my old stomping grounds, and I'm getting an exclusive interview with Speedy Bill Smith. And we're talking about the early years. We're going to bring you all the way up. We're going to give you the story today. And we're kind of getting through the racing years, talking about that. If you didn't listen, remember, you can always tune in on iTunes and catch that webcast later on. But Bill, we were talking about it's the drive and the determination, but you took all of that from racing and you learned, and would you say that's what you applied to your business? Because you were one of the very first speed shops in the Midwest when you opened.
Well, I was one of the very first speed shops in the world.
In the world, okay.
To straighten it out.
No, hey, you know what? We're here to set the record straight. If there's anything floating around out there that you want to set the record straight, now's the time to do it.
Well, there were a few others, but, in the middle of the U.S. where most of the people think that the pigs and cows come from, the perception is always everything. It was home always. I went to all the grade schools here, I went to all the high schools here, I went to all the colleges here, and it was always home, so I didn't trade the feeling for home for the feeling for the California effort or the Texas effort or Florida or wherever it might be. It moves around,
You brought it to you.
I brought it to me, and that's easier said than done, like all things in life. But it became a challenge, naturally, and like I said before, I'm very competitive. So my competitive effort is in the business, in my racing career, in street rodding. Actually, in the early days, when I started in '52, we took our street cars that we raced on the street at night and drove to work in the daytime and et cetera, took them to the county fair tracks and raced them on Sunday afternoon, the same vehicle.
Your street driver during the week, your racer, and then your weekend race car.
Yeah, and how do you explain those things to people?
Well, I can say when I lived in Nebraska, there was a little of that too. I used to have to explain to my parents why there was, 9-inch wrinkle walls on my Chevelle on Sunday morning, and, that was just for looks.
But that all transpired, and then, I always equate it to going to see your doctor. In the old days, you went to your doctor. If your toe was sore or if your nose was sore, he fixed your toe and your nose. He didn't send you to his pal, a specialist. So as these hobbies, interests, whatever you called them at the time, as they grew, then you had the specialist that, oh, this guy does circle track cars. This guy builds custom cars. This guy builds engines. He didn't know anything about the car that it's going in, but he'll build you the most horsepower that you ever wanted in your whole life. And this is the way this all grew. Probably like having a rose garden. And you started out with one plant, and you loved roses. But as you saw other roses, well, here were pink ones. I thought they were all red.
I gotcha.
Here, all different kinds. And some of these things are, like I said 3 or 4 times there, I hate to be repeating myself, but they are very hard to explain. Well, but the growth and the interest came with people that were doing things, and then people who respected the person that was doing them. Not everybody respects who's the president today. He's lucky if he gets 25% of the voting.
Right.
And so, but you have to remain humble. You can't be cocky unless you're John Butera.
He was born that way. He came out of the egg that way. So, well, let me reel this in a little bit. I think what you're trying to say is that, let's put it in car guy terms, is that there's guys that only like Mopars, or they only like Chevys, or they only like Fords. And you had a love, you kept looking out there and going, I like sprint cars. Hey, I like stock cars. Hey, I like street rods. I like motorcycles. And you gathered knowledge and acquired interest. And is that how you built your company? Because you gathered all that knowledge and interest and a broad interest, not a real focused on one area. You didn't just go for machined parts. You went for trying to give something to all the different type of auto enthusiasts with your company?
That is true. Early on, they're in, we'll say, building engines for the racer that I was building. I built every piece of it. The cars you see here in the museum, they weren't bought over here and bought over here and bought over here, and I bolted them together. I built all those pieces.
Okay.
And that's a hard thing to explain in today's society. But those interests, motorcycles in the 30s and the 20s from England had aluminum rocker arms on them. Well, who got the idea for aluminum rocker arms? Somebody who saw that and then transposed that item into putting them on a car. And there's so many things like that. I happen to be privy to go to the Ford Museum's clean-out auction.
Well, hold that thought, because we got to go to another commercial break. We got to pay for this thing. So, hey, this is Brad Fanshaw. I'm with Speedy Bill Smith here at Speedway Motors in Lincoln, Nebraska. Don't go away, because you heard it. It's right on the tip of his tongue. He's going to be talking about the Ford auction that he went to when we come back right here on Street Rod and Custom Radio.